for the music industry, but preparing you for anything that's going to come your way is very, very important. And it's always like, what's an opportunity? What's an opportunity? What's an opportunity? And I sort of hopefully don't bore you to death with this, but that's kind of the idea. And here's my quote for today. And because again, it's part of my philosophy. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So here again, very difficult to do things by yourself, and you cannot go very far. So think about the people in this cohort. Think of Matthew that came today. Think of Raphael that you know, and all of this. This is a real asset that you're getting. And in fact, you'll see, this is just a coincidence, but where I left you yesterday it was on this gentleman. I was showing you the video where he says, if you want to be a successful person, work for free because you're here to learn. In some ways, like, hey, Matthew, what you doing right now? Oh, do you need some help? Oh, I'm happy to help you. No, I'll help you. I'll help you out. And you learn from the better people. And that's was sort of his message. And that's a message that I find is very important. And in fact, here you have me with Professor Mackenzie and Professor Teagarden when they were the cohort 1. And at the end of cohort 1, I told them
no way, that's Teagarden. You looking fresh. Sorry.
And so I told them, I say, hey, I'm managing a competition, which is like a Shark Tank competition, and it's sponsored by Wells Fargo. And it's a competition where you do a pitch for an investor. And I said, that's kind of interesting. People do that. And right away they say, oh, can we participate? And it's this attitude. They didn't say, how much do I make? I can't work for free. They were not in this, I don't work for free mentality. They were into the more you expose yourself, the more people you meet, the more you challenge yourself, the more good things are going to come your way. And so we just saw Matthew just came. And it's sort of resonating to what I just said. So I wanted to show this. So stay in touch. This week I've got this message of someone that says, oh, I want to work here and there. Please help me out. I can do this and that. I think this is great, whatever. Here's another one on LinkedIn that I got. It's this professor that contacted me. He said, oh, you got this student. And his name was Augustine. And I told him, what's your name? Do you know Saint Augustine? He didn't know. I was telling him about Saint Augustine. The students had no idea his name, where was the origin. And then he went to become someone very involved in the marketing, and then he's doing an MBA. And the professor was, that's what happened. This girl also participated in the Wells Fargo Center, and now she has a free, unpaid, full scholarship in University of Connecticut to become a lawyer. So she totally changed direction. So what I'm saying is, to be a successful person, you need to be an entrepreneur. And then you become an entrepreneur in all kinds of things, and you just build relationship, use those relationships, and think about what you're going to do with it. So entrepreneurship is, you need to think yourself as a business. You need to build your contact list. You need to make your own opportunities. You need to have an understanding of how much you want to be paid for things. You create a system for your career. You create a buzz for your artwork. So this week it was Omar from the class. Omar contacted me and said, hey, professor, can I have access to the video of the presentation that we did? Because I want to use it in my portfolio. When I contact people, I want to talk about what I did, and I think this video is useful. And I said, of course. So that's what happens. Is Omar was thinking as an entrepreneur. He's creating a collection of his artwork, he's ready to show it, and he has some goals and some understanding. So that is very, very important. The music entrepreneurship is a discipline that intersects the traditional music discipline. But music entrepreneurship harnesses the skills and mindset of the entrepreneur to empower musicians to create work that is meaningful, sustainable, and oriented to community and market need. So you need to understand the market needs. Why would anyone be an entrepreneur? Because either they're trying to get an extra revenue, maybe they want to be able to have a special lifestyle and use the control of being an entrepreneur to manage your time, or maybe because they have the fiber of being an entrepreneur. They think like an entrepreneur and they want to bring something to the world. They want to become a leader. So first step is deciding to be an entrepreneur. Then is to develop some kind of business idea. So it's nothing wrong with having an idea at the beginning, but you want to move from an idea to being an entrepreneur, which is that it's supported by the pillar of there are opportunities in the market supporting the idea. not just an idea. If you have just an idea, that's an issue. And so entrepreneurship, and so this slide is showing you the 4 steps that are very important for the process of entrepreneurship. Is, you know, at the beginning, you work ideas, opportunities, ideas, opportunities, opportunities, ideas, and you try to make sure that you have something that's tangible and it's not just in your head, just as a simple conceptual idea. Then you start analyzing if it's feasible, you know, is there a large market? How many competitors do we have? And then what would be the business model? Where I would work from? Where I would produce? Where would I sell? What would be the distribution? Do I need more money? How much money do I need? Could I get the money from myself, from friends, from family, from the bank, from investors? And then you start unfolding this, developing your strategies, understanding the different steps. So what is an opportunity? I want to go back to this because I don't want this to be missed. An opportunity is a fact. An opportunity is not what you're going to do. The idea behind this is that you do some research to identify the opportunity, to solidify your ideas. You're looking at the customers, STP, the persona, who are the targets, what do they want, what is it that they're getting now, what is it that they're not getting, what is the problem that I can solve, and then you come up with a just noticeable solution of the solution that is slightly, somewhat better enough for them to want to get your product. So opportunities, strategies, and action. So it's analysis, definition of the strategy, the big picture, and then thinking about the details. You know, finding an influencer is not a strategy. Finding an influencer is a detailed action. So influencers are important, but there's something that needs to be done before you think about an influencer. Before Matthew works on the digital marketing, someone came up with some strategies, and that's what's very important. Here we're looking at Cliff Bar, and here he talks about it. The strategy came, the idea came, the opportunity came from all the same thing. Is he was eating protein bars, and as he found out, these protein bars were not the best, and he decided to take leadership and create the best protein bar in the world with a memorable name and a distinctive design of the packaging. Now, being disruptive is very, very important. It's not just important in the music industry. It's not just important in the digital marketing industry. I was thinking for you to tell you even about entrepreneurship and disruption in academia. So I'm a consultant, I'm an academic, I do different things. And I wanted to use my own situation as an academic because eventually when I started doing research, you have to do something that is unique. You have to do something that is just noticeably different. So in the 90s, I started working on the research of luxury brands. And then I had to come up with something that was slightly different than everybody else, that just noticeable different. Here, what's very interesting is when you actually look at my co-author, Lester Johnson, who's someone that is published, I mean, look at the number of publications, 271 publications. Probably this doesn't mean anything to you, but there's not too many people in the world that have done 271 publications. It's huge. In fact, Lester Johnson was the last professor in Australia to get the Knight level from Queen Elizabeth, the Queen from England. Every year she gives a prize for the best professors, the university professor, and he won in 2021. She just died 3 months after she gave this award. So he got this prize because he had 42 PhD students in his career, and he's one of the most referenced person in the world when it comes to marketing, with 16,218 citation. And so my disruption was pretty important because I'm, as one of the PhD students, I have pretty much 25% of all of his citations. So out of the 42 students, one has 25% is pretty good. So I did pretty good. So I was able to be a disruption for him. What was the disruption? So I looked at the world of luxury. I looked at the world of luxury brands. I looked at the world of prestige seeking, which is a behavior. And therefore, I did some research on consumer behavior. And so this is the area where I worked. When I looked at this concept, I found that it was broken down into two pieces. Either they talked about the effect that luxury had over the consumption of multiple people, so it's called interpersonal consumption, versus the fact that people were buying luxury just for themselves. So they buy, why do they buy a Prada bag? Because they want it, because it feels good in their hands. That's very personal. Versus they buy a Prada bag because they're going to go to a party where they want to be seen with the Prada bag because they want people to think they are something better than than the average person because they own this pretty Prada bag. So this was two different directions. And all I did is I created a paper and a research that was combining the two together. Instead of having separated my just noticeable difference, it was actually to take one and two and talk about these two at the same time because they were always discussed separately. So academia, you can also be disruptive. Entrepreneur, you can be entrepreneur is in anything you want. It doesn't have to be just the academic, the research and luxury, or the music industry, or anything like that. It's a state of mind. And it's very, very important to have this. It's like Apple. If they're thinking what they're doing is making computers, they would not be where we know them today. Then they were making the iPod, then they were making the iTunes, then they were making iPhones. They are not thinking just computer, laptops, or desktop, or whatever. They evolved and they're going after a satisfaction, a need that they're trying to satisfy, which is what they're focusing on. What brand have you bought recently? What was the opportunity they went after? Can anyone have some example to share of a brand that they enjoyed? Why did they buy it? And what is it that they found that they think was the opportunity they went after? Don't be shy.
Taylor guitars.
Why is that? What was the opportunity you think they went after that made you also buy this product?
What was their opportunity?
Yeah.
I think they fulfill a part of the market where guitarists want a guitar that's ready to be played that doesn't need any setup. Like it's set up at the factory, where a lot of guitars you buy, you still have to invest in it to get it playable.
Oh, I see.
They take care of that right away.
So yeah, that's a unique perspective, yeah, to make it set up from the factory. That's really good. Thank you, Devin. Any other example? Last thing I got is Fake Spot. Anyone knows Fake Spot? Fake Spot is probably something that next year when I tell the cohort 13, they all have it. I remember saying that about Facebook and even TikTok, and people were laughing at me. It's like, never, this name is stupid, TikTok. But anyway, Fake Spot is my prediction for the next big thing. It was created by Mozilla Firefox, so that's a big company like Adobe. And what they did is they created it because he's using artificial intelligence to gather all the reviews and combine the reviews to give you a level of certainty on the quality of the reviews that you're using. So instead of looking at the Amazon review, what they do is for buying something, is they look at all the reviews of the product and combine all of them. And then they give you a simple score from A, good, B, less good, C, less good, and then D, bad, and F, fail, like a student would understand in America. And so I think everyone next year, when I'm going to ask Fake Spot, probably half of the cohort will have Fake Spot. So what was the opportunity? The opportunity is we're all looking at single reviews, when in fact people don't want to read all the different reviews from all the different sections on the internet for a single product. No, what's great is you can look at a product, buy it from Walmart or buy it from Amazon, and you get the combination of all the reviews. And also they check the validity of the review. They have some kind of algorithm that actually remove Matthew and his fake fan pages out of the system. So Matthew's going to have a hard time now with Fake Spot because it's sort of filtering all of this. So opportunity, people want to read all the reviews, not just one. They want also a rating of the quality of the review and some kind of flavor, if it's real or if it's fake. Boom, product will be successful because that's all we want. We don't want fake reviews. We want fake reviews. Anyway, so there's a quote. It's not like I do a religious quote all the time. I never do it beside this one. But I think that one is very interesting. So I tell you, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks, the door will be opened. To me, this is very inspirational, and that's sort of the art and center of what entrepreneurship is about. Entrepreneurship is not for the people that don't ask. Entrepreneurship is for the people who go get a chocolate, from the bar, and then they go taste the chocolate and they wonder why the chocolate doesn't taste like chocolate, but it tastes like water. And then they go back to the bar and say, I'm really sorry, that chocolate is too much tasting like water. I'm sorry, but I need a chocolate that tastes like chocolate. And then they get a better chocolate because they ask. I think squeaky wheel gets grease, and entrepreneurs are people that are not on the status quo. They are curious and they want things to be better, and they don't worry about knocking at the door. And if people say no, it's okay. The next door may be a yes. And that's what's very, very important to me is think yes, don't think no. This I've already showed it to you a month ago, but I want to bring it back. Is what's a business plan? A business plan is all of this plan combination of all the different functions. The marketing plan is one of them, but a business plan does not exist. The business plan is the name of an index which comprise all the different plans. So we have the accounting plan, production plan, the legal plan, operation plan, and so forth. So I just want to bring this back because it's important, because you'll be asked so many times to do a business plan. You would be surprised. Next time you meet someone and you think they're really good, ask them in business, ask them what's a business plan. I would say 90% plus of the business people don't even know what's a business plan. And I just don't want my students to be one of these people. So I make sure to bring this up because it's so poorly understood. So what is marketing? Marketing is worrying about the customer, working with their satisfaction, delivering this satisfaction to the customer at profit and long term. So you know this. What do we do in business as this angle of looking for this? What are we looking for? We're looking for the opportunities. Opportunities are very important because if you're not thinking in terms of opportunities, you're thinking in terms of ideas. And if all you do is talks about ideas, you will be a bad entrepreneur. This is where Professor Mackenzie's job is to do next. He's going to take over the rest of the class and he's going to keep drilling in your head. Don't come up with an idea. Tell me about the opportunity of your enterprise. No ideas. No ideas spoken here. We only talk about opportunities. So that's where he's going to focus. Here's a client that we served a few years ago. What is the toilet turtle? Is it this, a turtle sitting on the toilet? Is it this, a toilet that looks like a turtle? Is it this, a turtle that fell in the toilet? No. The toilet turtle is this. It's a plastic cover that you put in the toilet so that way, when you plunge with your plunger, you're not splashed by the dirt and the crap and all this. Right. I have one here of the toilet turtle, and it's therefore this piece of plastic. And you have a hole in the middle. Oh, the camera's funny. And then you put the plunger here, you put it on the toilet, and it just covers. And the name is the toilet turtle. So this business came to us and said, I've produced 50,000 toilet turtle covers, and it's been 5 years, they're in my garage, and nobody wants it. And then we looked at this person and said, great, you're an entrepreneur, but what is this? Well, it's an idea. The idea is nobody wants to be plunging and getting crap in their face. True. But what is the opportunity? And then this client said, I don't understand why you're asking me about the opportunity. Well, if there's no opportunity, there's no business. Maybe that's why you have had this in your garage, 50,000 of them, not sold one for the past 5 years. So the idea is to find who cares for this, why would they care, what would they use it for, who are your competitors, what are people doing right now, what problem are you solving exactly, and who cares of this problem the best. And after some research, what we found is people that are janitorials that works in an area where there's a lot of toilets, like a hotel. And they would want to use this, and their executives will want them to use this because we found that there was like 50% of the janitorial people, staff, cleaning staff, that would miss in action because they would be infected by some sort of bacteria. Therefore, if you want to have more staff that goes to work, you need to protect them. And in addition, you also want to protect the clients that comes to the hotel and sit around those toilets that have been plunged. Because if you actually were to look for the stains, you will find it's very dirty because every time they clean, they splash everywhere. So convincing the hotel, convincing the cleaning, showing the savings on not having these dirty toilets that gets germs and infection to everyone is a cost-saving issues, and it's worth getting the product. It solves the problem, and it's effective financially. Once we explain this to the client had to go to the loop of creating a B2B type of business. And this client never did that. And the product doesn't exist. If you actually Google it, it's nowhere to be found, even though it was a real product that was solving a real problem. But it was started on the wrong premise, which was it was started from an idea with no research, no understanding of the market, no thinking about the customers. Does that happen often? Very often. It's all the time. So should business be based on an idea? What do you think?
Should be inspired by an idea.
You should be inspired by an idea.
And it should be motivated by an idea.
Exactly. So starting with an idea is the most common thing. In fact, there's a really good movie. Thank you, Andrew, for answering. There's a very good movie, which is called Joy, with Jennifer Lawrence. I recommend this movie. It's excellent. One of the best movie. In an hour and a half, you will learn a lot. And in fact, I mentioned this earlier in the class. It was given to me by a Cohort student from the 10th Cohort. And so this movie is great because it talks about a real lady, the lady on the right side, a real story. She became a multi-million-dollar business because she came up with an idea. But her idea was successful because it was solving a real problem. So she started an idea, then she created the product, and then she struggled. And that's what the story is about, is it explains to you the struggle. I strongly recommend it because it's very entertaining. There's good actors in this movie, and it's a true story. And at the same time, you'll learn a lot about the different paths. I think if you watch the movie, you will find 50% of all the things that I've tried to explain in this class summarized. So it's an hour and a half of entertainment. If you never watch a movie, you probably won't look at it. But if you ever watch a movie again in your life, I recommend this one, Joy. And it's from 2015. It's $1, like $2 on YouTube. If you were to pay, if you have Netflix or whatever, it's probably free because it's a big movie. It's not a small movie. I mean, it has Robert De Niro and all that. Here's one of the scenes where she created the product, which is a mop. She came up with the first mop ever in the world that you don't have to use your hands in order to rack it and get the water out and clean it out. You actually squeeze it out. And she came up with this solution because of a problem that she faced. And she mopped on a boat that had wine glasses that were broken. And then when she was about to mop using her hand, she was cutting her hand, and she found it very difficult to use them up again, and she had to throw them up. So she decided she could create a mop that you would self-rake it by pushing on the pressure thing. And she didn't know any engineering. She just came up with it because she was very curious, and she had the mind of an entrepreneur. After this, she created so many other products, and she became very successful because she used technology in order to sell the products, which in the 1980s was TV shopping. She was one of the first small entrepreneurs that was successful on TV selling a product that she created herself in her kitchen table. So what's interesting is you have to be very careful who takes care of your brand, because in one of the things in this movie, she doesn't think she can take care of the brand. So she lets someone else do it. But this someone else is actually so bad that it ruins their brand. And then she decides to take care of it herself. And so obviously now we live in a world where people are using TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and so forth to talk about their products. So it's much more common. But in the 1980s, it was not so common. You would not see too many women involved in entrepreneurship. Two, there are very few women that are involved in pattern. And then very few women would get involved into the commerce and the negotiation and all that. So she was sort of a pioneer, and she was rewarded by becoming a multi-millionaire. Anyway, looking at brands is you need to think about the concept of brand equity. It's very important. The different stages of brand equity and the fact that you can't just think about having brand known. You need to make sure that you have an association. Brand association is the idea that there is a positioning of your brand, and that's something that the consumer wants, but at the same time, something that is different from your competitors. Then you have to constantly discuss the different various level of quality of your product. And eventually you want to build some fans, and you want to use this loyalty that you have to launch new products, also use this loyalty that you have in order to negotiate with the distribution. The distribution are very risk averse, and they're only going to distribute things that are easy to sell, and they're going to look for brands that have a lot of customers that care for that brand. Where do you look for opportunities? I'm not going to spend a long time on that, but that's a repeat, is you look in your macro and macro environment. So for this project, as a startup, is that's what you do, is you come up with ideas, like Andrew said, and you come up with lots of ideas, things that you think are exciting. And it's brainstorming, brainstorming, brainstorming until you have a good set of ideas, 5, 6, 7, 8 ideas, because you have 8 members in your team. And then each one looks for the supporting evidence, the opportunities. And once you get the supporting evidence, you pick the one that is the simplest, the most supported, and then you create your SWOT and you create your PESON. And that's the first stage of the things that you need to have. Now, when we look at people that are great entrepreneurs, we see there's one of them is Steve Jobs. And one of his most amazing video is this one. And it's a video that you can find yourself on the internet. And in fact, each one of these videos, what I do is I give you the link to go to them so you can go look at it again. Today, I'd send you the PDF. So you have the PDF of all the presentation I have, and you will see the number. But this video, you won't find it in a better quality. It's a poor quality. You barely can hear everything. But what happens is there is subtitles, but even with the subtitles, just a subtitle video, I think is very good. It's one of the most best video from Steve Jobs, and since Steve Jobs is revered as one of the best, so it's really one of the best of the best. How do you explain why so many products fails? That was a question that you had in the previous class, and I just wanted to put a long list of reasons why the product fails. You know, the lack of marketing, there's so many different reasons, and I just put a list in there. You have this available. The next question is, how do you go about reducing marketing costs? So that was another questions that is related to this, and I wanted to put a long list of reasons here because it's important to see that marketing is a cost. Marketing has pros and cons, but one of them is definitely this issue of costs. Should entrepreneurs focus on developing their business ideas? So the business ideas oftentimes are very esoteric. It's just one person. Investors do not like to invest in ideas. And so that's why we want to try to be careful that you move away from just talking about ideas, but talk about the sources that sort of give confidence that those ideas are real. You can't evaluate ideas because it's very vague. You have those ideas that lack of nuances. It's just someone's thinking about something, but you have to experience it in order to see the real reason. So it reminds me of my son that wanted to go ski in Mammoth last weekend. But I told him it's 6 hours to go and 6 hours to come back. It's a long way. And he says, well, 6 hours, it's okay. So we went skiing, and after 3 hours, he was like saying, when are we arriving? When are we arriving? When we're arriving? So the idea of going to ski to Mammoth is great. The action of actually doing it physically is very different. And so business are like this, is you can fantasize about it, but doing it is much more concrete. So you need to make sure that you have concrete reason to believe that it's going to turn out exactly the way or very close to the way that you're thinking about. So many reasons why developing business ideas are not the most optimal. Next one, or how important are failures for entrepreneurs? So that's one is also very important because you want to embrace failures, not because you are sadomasochist and you like to hurt yourself and have the feeling of hurting and being miserable. Is you want to embrace failures because if you're so scared of failures, that may be one of the reasons why this person will never be an entrepreneur because they don't want to fail. But part of being a competitor is part of being someone that learns as you go. And if you succeed, it means you're not trying too hard. You're doing it in a league at a level that is too simple. If you're failing all the time, that means you may be doing something too hard. So therefore, you want to learn from your mistakes in order to go to the next step. So it's like sometimes it's baby step, one thing to another, and learning to adapt. And so I have my own little concept of the way I see entrepreneurship is I call it Darwinership. It's like survival of the fittest within an environment where you have to adapt. And that's somehow what Matthew was talking about. You are in this class, you're working with other people, you don't always get along, but that's okay. That's normal life because as you're working even for Warner Brothers, you'll be facing this situation where not everybody gets along. So I have many other reasons that I explained that are important for learning from failures, which are on this slide that I'll let you go at your leisure to look at. Now I want to shift to the second part. Okay, two. So the second part is related to many things, and that's just this slide in itself can be an hour, but I'm going to try to make it extremely fast, hoping that you still understand the importance of it. So when you're an entrepreneur, you want to minimize the risk, and you want to make sure that you have an understanding of all the pieces. It may look like you're doing things that are natural, but in fact, you've rehearsed a lot on it. So it's like someone playing an instrument, someone playing a guitar. When you see them do it, it may look very easy, and it looks like anyone could do this, but then when you try to do it, it's very different. Or you see someone skating, ice skating, it looks like anyone could just go and jump and all that, and then when you try to do it, it's very, very different. So being a successful entrepreneur is not all luck, or it's not everyone can succeed to this, but it takes a number of tasks that you have to do very well. Understanding the market, understanding the different players in the market, understanding the trends and all this. So you want to rehearse, you want to practice. Practice makes perfect. And being the best way to learn to be an entrepreneur is to become one. That's the first one. Then the second one is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so the video that we just saw of Steve Jobs is essentially summarized by this quote, which is probably one of, if not the most famous quote in business. And when you do a master degree that has to do with business, you should have heard at least that quote one time. And it's from probably the most revered reference author, Peter Drucker, which has made those two quotes. So what does that mean? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. When Steve Jobs was saying, hey, you know, we could have the best strategy, the best agency, we could have all of this, but what is the value, the core value of Apple? What does Apple means? What is our soul? What is our culture? That's what he was talking about. And so he said, we need to go back to our culture. And that's why they created the slogan of think different, which is the culture of Apple. So every time they do something, they need to be able to disrupt, have this idea of thinking different. And did you hear Matthew? He gave us the name of the company he's working right now with, is Disrupting Records or whatever. And you can see that everyone is trying to be someone that think different. Everyone is trying to be this Apple culture. But what is the culture? Is that if you come up with strategies, it's like a doctor telling someone that they should stop smoking. That's a strategy. So why don't you take this nicotine, whatever, or why don't you go to that group, or why don't you read that book? That's a strategy, that's a tactic, but that doesn't change anything. It's the culture maybe that need to change for whatever the doctor is saying is nothing that the people are going to do. You have to change the culture before you can change the habit. And so cultures eat strategy for breakfast. That's what it means. Is for a business to be successful, it has to be successful from the core, from the bone, from its culture, before it starts thinking about making products that are going to be better. Is this idea of better needs to come from inside. So again, this little concept of Darwinership, which I've explained many times, and I've explained it. These are the words, these are the images. This equals this. It's 100% the same. Difference is this is images. On that image, it says research is looking at the STP, research is looking at the opportunities, and research is looking at the just noticeable difference. You need to be different, but it's not because you're different that you're better. It's that difference needs to be meaningful to a specific target, which is based on the trends and the change in the market, which is called your opportunities. Another thing I wanted to bring up again, because that's going to save you sometimes, you don't go away from the concept of doing some research, marketing research. You have to do this for this class again. And here again, I'm going to say the same thing I said before, is don't go into doing 100, 200, 6,000 surveys. Do the exploratory research, which consists in going into the databases, which we had Lindsay Brown, the librarian that came last week to discuss about. Go into Google, and that's fine. And more important, extremely important, that's going to make a ton of difference, is interview people. Interview some real customers, get some real customer feedback yourself besides using databases. So exploratory research is enough. You don't have to go in descriptive research, you don't have to go in causal research. You just know that there's different level of research from a very sort of not quantity-based, but quality-based, and secondary data. That's the exploratory research. It's good enough, it's plenty enough. You don't have to collect your data yourself through the primary of a big survey or whatever. Collect the data from interviews is good enough. Maybe you've heard of this gentleman, Marcus Lemonis. Is someone that's very successful as an entrepreneur, and he has a a show where it helps businesses succeed. Here's a very short video of just over a minute that explains what he thinks as an entrepreneur is the most important thing. So again, go alone, go fast, go far, go together. That's, again, very similar to this concept that I was talking about. So it's very important to understand that you don't succeed by yourself. Another thing I want to repeat, but I think you should be okay, but I don't want people to forget what they've learned. And what you learn is that opportunities are pillars of businesses, and opportunities are facts. They are not what you're going to do. So you talk about the facts in the market, the trends, the change in the market that are happening, and what you can do with it. The just noticeable difference is the small little differences that you're going to bring, or they may be more than small, but that you're going to bring in order to make changes. And then next thing I want to talk about is a repeat. But I want you to still see that it's very important. So the repeat here is that and he said that the customer is first, and he put it as the fifth. I would have put customers first as the number one. But anyway, I agree on his 5 in the list. It's just the order. I would put it slightly different. But anyway, the customers is always right, and the customer is number one. And you're going to look at it by trying to understand how do they think. So that's going back to something we discussed before. What is the funnel of the decision making from seeing that they have a problem, looking for solutions, testing the solutions, buying the product, being satisfied, dissatisfied? That's very important, this funnel. The other thing that is extremely important, I can't tell you how, and that's something that we're going to be kind of keeping our eye on, is once you do a startup, with the startup, it's very difficult to sell to everyone. So it's extremely important to really have a clear definition of who you're going to sell at the beginning, because you don't have huge resources. Who are you selling at the beginning is very important. So identifying those innovators, those sort of the first group of consumers, these real influencer innovator that will be the first one to buy the product and create this wave that is necessary, but it's not, you don't make money from selling to the innovators. The innovators is just a step that is necessary in order to start making money through the other groups, the early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. Then the other thing that is important is when you're launching products, you have different interests in the various stages of the product, but that's not something that concerns you when you're an entrepreneur looking for a startup. You're not trying to scale up the business, because that's something you do after, but I want you to realize that entrepreneurship is not just to create a business and run away, because you have to scale up, you have to keep growing the business, and therefore you have to worry about the different stages of the product life cycle. Because your product that you sell at the beginning of your startup may not be the one that you keep selling in 2 years, in 3 years, depending if you're in high technology, maybe a few months. So you have to constantly create products and develop new products. So new product development is a very important strategy for everyone, but it's so important for startup because you have to, that's the point of a startup. So very quickly, what I did is I reviewed some of the things that you have seen before, and I put it in the same slide deck, so that way you can always go back to it. And it's not just for lip services or taking your time away. It's because these are things that are important to think when you are an entrepreneur. Is thinking about your portfolios, thinking of the various products that you have in your portfolio. When you're an entrepreneur and you are at the stage of the startup, that's what you're doing for this class as the assignment. You don't have to so much to think about what's the question mark and the cash cow, because you're just starting. So you have no product in any of these quadrants. Your product doesn't exist yet. Very quickly, another entrepreneur that I recommend is Gary Vaynerchuk, as known as Gary V. I recommend him because he has some very deep advices that I think are critical for people to listen to when they're thinking of being an entrepreneur. Anyone knows Gary Vaynerchuk? Okay, so nobody knows him. So I put some link here. So it's like, a few of his YouTube videos that I think are really good. I mean, he has millions of views on YouTube. Caring less about other people's opinions. So that's very important. It's this equilibrium, this balance that you need to find between constantly asking for opinion. I told you that you need to do interviews of consumers versus not listening to anyone anymore. Because if all you do is listen to people, you will end up doing a half job. At some stage, you need to have some conviction, some ambition, some objectives, so personal beliefs in order to come up with a disruption that is very unique to you. So you think different, and then you believe in you thinking different, but you don't want to be only thinking about what you think or only thinking about what other people think. So you have to find this balance, and that's what he talks about. Chase your passion more than you chase money. And that was the number one in Mark Lemonis, where I was talking about the people that trying to be an entrepreneur to get rich and all they think about is the money. He agrees with this, and that's one of the videos successful. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. So I don't know how many times I've said that, and that's so important. Is you don't want to be product oriented. You create a product, you love your product. Who doesn't love your product is a loser. That's such a wrong attitude. The attitude is people have problems evolve, you evolve with the problem, and that's what an entrepreneur should do. What it really takes to become a successful entrepreneur, and that's sort of this overall video. So he has a huge event with lots of people that come, people actually pay. And what's interesting is he started the event by telling them, don't come to my events, because if you're here, it means you're procrastinating and you should be working on your business instead of listening to me telling you what to do. Do it is better than listening to someone to tell you what to do. Benchmarking is very important. So when you come up with a startup, it's very rare that you come up with something that never existed anywhere. You have to have some references. The basic benchmarking is to look at the strengths and weaknesses of your competitors. But I don't want you to be just looking at one or two characteristics of benchmarking. There's many more characteristics than that. And in fact, if you do a chat GPT of what are the characteristics of benchmarking, you won't find as many as this. Is more than what chat GPT, because chat GPT is still working on it, still learning on what's benchmarking. But I've been doing it for 30 years plus, so I know what are the elements that goes inside. So SW, like I just said, but looking at their strategies, looking at their objectives, defining who are their targets, what is their positioning, the different prices they use, where do they sell, what channels, what collaboration do they have, looking at the product development and overall portfolio and innovations that they have, type of market share that they have, look at their communication channels and how they communicate. So the most common thing these days, and many people ask the question to Matthew, is what's the next platform? Which platform do they use? Which influencers do they use? Which agencies do they use, and so forth? And then look at how do they deal with distribution? Do they own part of the distribution, part of all of this? And then you also do benchmarking, and this is very out of the box thinking, but you can do benchmarking in other industries, not just looking at your industries, because you may find something disruptive in another industry. So I don't know, you're selling wine, maybe you look at the milk industry to see if there is anything that they do that is different that you could borrow. So you work in the music industry, maybe you look in the fashion industry, maybe something that the fashion industry does is something you could be using. Maybe you look in America, and you're looking at another market, and you find something in the music industry done overseas that you can bring to the US, and then it would be totally new here. What is very, very, very important, and many of you have done it in the previous class when you presented the different competitors, but in this class, it's even more important, is to do a chart, a comparison chart of your competitors. So this, I'm hoping and I'm praying that this is what I'm going to see. I believe next time I see you, it's on the 13th of May or something like that, when you do your final presentation. I'm hoping that you all will have competitive landscape charts. And I'm giving you one sample here for you to see. And this was another cohort that was working on an app. They define an app that would be an app that would help artists in order to start working on their different activities, the merch, the booking of events and organizing things and so forth, the reviews and all that. So they came up with a name for a new app called Stage Match. And Stage Match will be able to do all of these different things for a specific price, and versus the competitor that was not able to do all of this. So please, 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 this chart is super useful when you do competitive analysis. And when you're looking for an investor to invest, they want to see a chart. They want to see where you fit. They want to see your features. So instead of doing one slide that talks about the feature, one slide that talks about the competitor, one slide that talks about your prices, what you do is you do one slide that talks about those three things with this kind of presentation. And that way you get 3 birds with 1 stone. Another thing that I want to bring up is and that's, you've done it. But, you know, I remember mentioning that was something that was difficult to get the first class, but hopefully you get it more the second class, is the difference between strategies and tactics. So here again, we go back to this, is when you develop your one sheet when you develop your go-to strategy plan and then the final presentation, is you need to really see the difference between the big picture and the small details. So it's like social media is not a strategy. Finding an influencer is not a strategy. These are tactics. The strategies are actually listed here, and I put it in there, is market penetration, product development, overall cost leadership, focus, middle of the road. So all of these, I've put it back. Obviously, you can go back to the slide from the previous class, but that's what you want to talk about. So you want to have this big picture. And the most common one of the strategy that it's probably 90% sure that you will be using is new product development strategy. So when you come up with this new product that will be this ID for your startup, which will be supported by opportunities that you're going to have great references to give it to us in order to sort of give us evidence that what you're saying is more true than not true, and reducing the risk, is you have to talk about the different stages of the development of this. So if any of you are good at designing or creating mock-ups or whatever, it will be very, very smart. It could be just Photoshop, but just go and start developing things. So it was pretty common at one stage where people were developing apps or developing websites or posts or videos. So you have to develop these. They don't have to be perfect, but we need to get the ideas. I don't know how to develop a website. It doesn't matter. Do Photoshop. It doesn't have to be active. It just has to show us the big elements. So develop things, even if they don't work, they are just simulation or visual, they are not 3D or whatever, even if they look gross because you don't know how to design very well. It's important that you show us visual things, and it's very important if you develop things that you test it with some customers. So you could develop 3 different designs, show it to interviews, and then from the interview, narrow it down to one of the best. And that's what you discuss when you make the presentation. So the more this you make it live, and the more you're collecting the data, and the more you're getting yourself involved in the development, the better. But again, I said this last time, is be careful not to do something too complicated that it will need 6 months to do. The simpler, the better. As long as it's supported, it's great. One last strategy that I'm going to talk about is pull and push strategy. And that's very important to try to remember these. That's another important communication strategy that talks about the fact that selling directly to the customers is when you actually create like social media content, you sell that, you to communicate directly to the customers. Advertising is another one, but that's usually too expensive for a startup. Putting ads in magazines, on the radio, usually that's too expensive. Obviously now with cable TV, with banners, all of these are becoming less expensive because there's less demand for it. But these are the push strategy that you'll be using. Versus pull strategy is when you give people the option of buying 2 for the price of 1, when there's reduction of a percentage, when there is this all sorts of discounts for volume purchase and so forth. So that's also very important. Maybe when you have a game, something that gets people involved. That's the pull strategy. So pull strategy is incentive to sell more products. Pull strategy is directly communicating to the customers, building this brand awareness of this product, and then people want the product because they've seen it somewhere, versus they're buying the product because it's a good deal from the pull strategy. This slide, it's in there. Don't be confused between this slide and that slide. Those 2 slides are the same. The difference between those 2 is that this one is giving you a flavor of what's the broad and what's narrow, what's at the top and what's at the bottom. So at the top, you have the big picture, which is the strategies. So it's a high level strategy. And at the bottom, you have the 4 Ps, which are the lower level strategies and also the tactics that you're going to be implementing for each one of them. So I'm not trying to re-teach you the class I taught you before, is I try to bring you back to the very important elements that are sort of expected from an entrepreneur. So things that you want to use. So it's not like you did one class and then you move to another one where you forget everything about the class before. In fact, what you learned in the class before, now you actually get to use it in a more personal way because you're sort of pretending that you are working on that business and it's real. And then you will be presenting it as you're looking for money from the investors. So we look at it from the eyes of the investor. The next slide does the same thing in the sense that it talks about the broad and the narrow. And so the 1 is in gray is the broad, and 2 in the narrow is the the tactics. So you have the 4Ps tactics and you have the sub-strategy. So what I did is I created the sub-strategy for each one of them. So can you use those sub-strategy as your strategies? You can. So if you say, hey, we need to make sure that we speak strategy or sub-strategy when we make our presentation, just make sure these are the terms that you use in order to speak, and make sure that you make a big distinction between strategies and tactics. That's sort of where we hope to see you move and really make a distinction between both. It's easier said than done, but that's something we hope that you do. So the 4Ps is what you also will be presenting for that startup. But now I want to show you something that's important, is the TAM, SAM, SUM. It's something that one group did in the previous class, and 3 groups didn't. The one group that did it very well. So they probably won't need to really hear me there, or maybe they just need to be reminded. But what it is that you have 3 levels looking at the market. You have the total available market. Then there's the one that you could service, and then the sum is the one that you will be focusing on. So that's what the TAM, SAM, SUM. So when you look at it, again, this is the same explanation. That's sort of the best map. It's like 3 circles that overlaps. And the 3 circles that overlaps is what I recommend that you use in order to present it. So we have an example here where we have 3 times SAM, where you talk about different number of people or different dollars or different percentage. And the idea is you try to narrow it down from the overall group versus the small group. So here's one sheet. So this one sheet is for a company that was created by a previous cohort, which they call ELS, Entertainment Life Specialist. And what they do is they help psychologically to sustain psychologically artists. Because a lot of big labels lose money from artists becoming depressed and anxious and not being able to compete and work as much as they should. It's very easy for them to get depressed too. This group of students said, we create a specialty clinic, which would be specialized just for artists. It would be extremely confidential, and they could be coming not just from Sony or Universal, they could be coming from all the different major, and they would not be owned by any, and those artists would come there and get a very dedicated type of services. So when you look at their market, is the total number of artists, 2.1 in America. The number of artists that are actually going to therapy, so they found the data, and there was 378,000. And then the serviceable market that could be obtained. So here, the sum, the TAM and the SAM is based on real statistics. But the sum is something that you have to create yourself by making an estimate. And the estimate is the percentage that you think you will be able to reach from the SAM. So if the SAM has 10 million, and then you say, hey, we can reach 1%, that means that you'll be able to reach 100,000 people the first year. So you have to come up with this percentage, and this percentage, you have to argue for it, which means that if you're doing a clinic, for example, and you said you're going to go after 1% of the 10 million, and it's 100,000, it's unrealistic for a clinic to take care of 100,000 celebrity a year that have psychological problem. It makes no sense. So everyone has to come up with a number that is a number that seems reasonable and realistic. So TAM is just statistical, looking at how many people do X. So you find a source, a recent source, and you find this. So you say, for example, TAM is all people playing guitar in America. SAM is all the people playing guitar in Los Angeles. So you find those two, you don't make up those two. And then the sum is how many can we do something specific to them. And there usually it's 1%, 0.5%, 2%. It all depends what is it that you're going to do to them that you can arguably justify a percentage that you will be going after the first year. If your percentage is too big, you're going to look like an unrealistic person, and we're going to think that you're unrealistic and it's never going to happen. You're dreaming too much. If your number is too low, we may be feeling that it's not very a big business maybe it's a too small business, maybe a business that lacks ambition, and therefore investing in a business where the owners lack ambition is not a great idea. So you have to find this balance when it comes to the sum. And once you get the sum, you get a percentage, and then you make an estimation of how much revenue, therefore, you'd be making by looking at how much you're going to charge for whatever you're going to use to these people, multiply by that percentage, which is the percentage taken from the sum, and then you come up with projection. And you have the first year projection, the second year projection, the third year projection as it evolves. You can look at the 5 forces, you can talk about the different features of your product. That's just one example. Here's another example that was done for cassette. So there was a group a few years ago that were looking at tapes and go back in the business of tape and create a tape business. And they were looking at the time, the number of people listening to music, the number of people listening to music and making their own record. And then the sum was the 1% of the people that they thought that they could be selling product the first year. Here's another example of a business that was trying to come up with a service. So, you know, to the question, should the startup have anything to do with music? It could be not directly related to music, but still a service that would help music. So this was a drone service for concerts. So obviously now this is something that is used a lot. I just want to remind you that the world of technology changed very quickly, and I've been doing this for 12 years. So this is not from last year. This was a startup disruptive idea 10 years ago to use drones for concerts. It's not anymore because every concert used drones. So when they came up with this was didn't exist pretty much. But they thought there would be a service that would be making drones in order to capture the event and be able to project it on big screens so people would see different angles and blah, 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 all the things that you know today. But back then it was very disruptive. It was a great idea. So they looked, you know, again, the same idea, looking at the TAM is the number of artists in America, looking at the number of artists that are touring, which therefore will need a drone, and then come up with a percentage of the artists that they think will be using their services for the first year. So TAM, you don't make it up. It comes from a source. SAM, you don't make it up. It comes from a source. But SUM, it's your own estimate of what is the percentage that you think you could capture the first year. So we see you want something reasonable that has the first year, the second year, the third year, because it's possible, and it happens very often, that the first year you're not making any money, but you make money as you keep growing the business, and therefore they may be you may be losing something the first year, you may be breaking even, making zero the second year, and then the third year is when you start making profit, or some kind of evolution like this that seem reasonable. There are some businesses that can make money the first year, and there are some businesses that takes more time even than 3 years to make some money. But you want to come up with a story, and you see inside, you always have the same thing, is who we are, what are the features of the product, what are the opportunities, so state the opportunity. You see, increasing demand for live performance among fans. So they don't say what they're going to do in the opportunity. They're just talking about the facts of the changes in the industry. And then they come up with a nice little quantification showing the TAM, SAM, SUM in order for us to see what are we looking at. So that's what we expect in the one sheet. Here's another example for Venue Master, which is just some system of databases to actually work on numbers and give as much information as possible to independent musicians. So independent musicians are don't have the access to all the resources as much as the big label, but the databases are becoming more and more effective. I mean, this was done maybe 6 years ago, 7 years ago. So you have to imagine 7 years ago, this was before COVID and all that. Using an app for small independent musician was something that was much more new than it is today. So those students came up with this idea and they explained who's the target. So that was pretty good to already start the targets, defining the opportunities, what are the key features of the product, how we're going to make money, the revenue model, and then more close up on the TAM, SAM, SUM. So here's the number of artists, how many are foreign artists, because they thought the foreign artist was a very good target in order to sell the services, and then which one would we capture the first year. So they had a penetration rate of 50%, and if my memory serves me well, that percentage was too big. They didn't realize that 50% the first year was way too ambitious. I would not be surprised that they went down to 5% in the next presentation after this, maybe even less than 5% in order to get the business run. This is another one that was very interesting because they were looking at vinyl and they were trying to come up with this concept of a startup that would have access to production of vinyl on demand for consumers. But what they wanted to do is to do a peer-to-peer where people would pledge. They would look at many different combinations of songs on the vinyl that would be printed, and they will ask people to pledge for the combination. So there was different combination. They would rate the combination, and the combination that would get the best rating, reaching a certain level of thousands of people, because you need a large number of people in order to print those vinyl. You can't do it just for 2 or 3. I forgot the number it was. Probably it says it in there. No, they don't. I don't see the number, but in the presentation they did. They came up with this not in words, but as they present. Obviously, they don't read the presentation. You have to comment what's written there when you make the presentation. But I forgot the number, but it was a pretty large number. There were issues with copyrights and all these different things, but they explained all of this. They didn't explain it the first time because they had to themselves understand it better. But the concept of pledging, the concept of peer-to-peer, these were concepts that were very advanced, coming up with a name, coming up with the different themes. That was very important. So that's sort of what we would like you come up with the ideas, look at for the opportunities, start thinking about the feature of the product, start thinking about who's going to be using it, then quantify who's going to be using it, start making some business model and estimation of how many you're going to sell. That's where you should be focusing on. So Napkin was another type of app, and Recorda was also a flute that was an electronic flute that was made in order to help people learn to play music. And it was an electronic flute that was not very fancy, but it was simple for people to get information through the flute in order to get some senses of what it was using, was to better use it and to get some kind of feedback from the flute and so forth. So all of these, again, as you can see, each one of the sample, and I didn't pick the sample because they had the time sum sum. You need to have the time sum sum. There's one here that is inserted, which is the break-even analysis. It's a little early to talk about the break-even analysis. You may not have all the information. It will be kind of like going too fast. So the break-even analysis is a very important element, which I speak in the next slide. It's an extremely important element that is more expected in the go-to-market presentation, which is the next one after the one sheet. Should you start worrying about it now? Yes, it doesn't hurt to think about it. And what I would like to say is that the break-even analysis is, it's simple, it's not rocket science, it's the idea is very much directed towards the investor. So the investor, you're gonna ask them for some money. And they're gonna not worry so much about how much you ask, they're gonna worry about when do I get back my money and how much profit do I get? And that's what they worry about. So the break-even analysis is looking at how much does the product cost, how much the product profit is, and then he looks at the money given by that investor. So for the sake of numbers, and that's what you hear in Shark Tank in every single episode. That's the question that is asked: is how much do you want, what percentage do I get, and when do I get my money back? So that's essentially break-even analysis. So you say, you give me $100,000, you get 20%, and therefore you get 20% of the profit. So sometimes the way you negotiate this is you ask for $100,000, you give a small percentage of the ownership of the business, let's say 10%, and you give them a 50% return for the first 5 years. So you don't have to give the same return on the profit, which is equal to the share or owner value. It could be different. You could have a small share owning and a large profit or a large share owning and a smaller profit. This, you have to sort of come up with what's the best scenario, and you have to justify which one is the best. So the idea here is that the more you give them money, the faster, the more profits you have to make, and therefore the more markup you have to put on the product. So if the product costs $5, you may have to sell the product $15, or $8, $10, So the variation of how much you're going to sell it for will generate a different amount of profit, which will get a return on the investment slower or faster. And that's what you have to simulate and project. So the best way to do this is to work on this break-even analysis chart. And so what I can do, I think it would be helpful if I haven't done it already, is to email you an Excel spreadsheet, which already has an embedded break-even analysis inside that you can use in order to make this projection, where you're looking at simple things such as the cost, the profit, the revenue, and the time and the number of units they would take. Because that's the problem. If you say we sell to 2% of the market and the 2% is 2,000 customers, you have to make sure that those 2,000 customers is 2,000 units sold per year is equal to the return on investment, which is nice to give back to the investors. And that's how you get evaluated is if it's too high, it's suspicious. If it's too low, it's not very motivating. So the break-even is sort of the most objective tool that you will be using in order to present to the investors if this is a good investment. So you have to have the right brain and the left brain. So the right brain is going to be looking at the opportunities, it's going to be looking at the design, it's going to be looking at the persona, the different customers, it's going to look at the brand, it's going to look at that. Then you have the left brain that's going to think about the timeline, how all of this is going to be implemented, and the money that's going to be required, and the break-even of the time it's going to take and the number of units being sold in order for the money to come back. So it's two different things that needs to be expressed and presented at the same time. Not just talking about money or not just talking about the uniqueness of the product and the competitiveness of the product. That's good, but that's not enough. You need to have both sides. In order to help you, there is a rubric for the one sheet. The things that's sort of expected in the one sheet that you should have on this document. And so this is in Canvas, but I have it already in this presentation, which I've emailed you before the class today. So you have it in case you missed it in Canvas. Now you have it. It's very important that you look at these in order to create that one sheet. To be a little bit ahead is I also put the rubrics for the go-to-market, even though this is going to be something that's going to be very much pushed by Professor Mackenzie. I just wanted you to see it a little bit ahead of time and see you know, like the break-even analysis is appearing here. The definition of your segment targeting and positioning, you know, the personas is more required here than it is in the one sheet. So talking about the budget, how much money you're going to have, how much sales you expect, and all of this is more expected in the second stage than in the first stage. Altogether, there's 3 stages. So there's also a rubric for the third stage, but all of this is in Canvas. I don't want to put too many, all the rubrics there. Maybe I should have done that, but I just took the first one, which is the due in a few weeks, and then the second one due a little bit down the road in later April. But it's important that you see that. Do you have any questions for me on this? So it is very important that you brainstorm with your group. It is very important that you be very open-minded to listen to each other to come up with all of these ideas, and that you find something that you're excited to talk about. Now I'm going to talk about things that are a little bit more practical in terms of what does it take to create a business. So the legal implication. So the legal implication is first, it's important to have a strong culture of establishing this business, choosing an attorney, making all kinds of agreements, thinking that there could be problems down the road, getting some licenses, following the government regulation, and also thinking about the form of business that you're going to have. So the first one is this idea that you have a strong ethical culture. So you want to make sure that you have a brand, that you're going to trademark this brand, that you have documents to protect yourself from liabilities, how much risk you're taking, what kind of money, resources you're going to have, what kind of risk and issues you may be running, how many employees you're going to have, how many assets you're going to have to buy, and the risk of these assets to have to be replaced. And all of these different elements needs to be discussed at the beginning. Choosing an attorney is also very important. So people don't realize that. they don't think they need an attorney. So the way I've proceeded with this is through referrals. So I know people and I ask them for, certain attorney, because not every attorney is good at doing everything. So there's attorneys that, in fact, I would say there's the BB gun contract attorney, and then there's the bazooka contract attorney. So there's contract attorney that are different than the people that do intellectual property. There's also attorney for defense and appeal, and so these are also different attorneys. So, but at the same time, for each one of these type of attorneys, you have the big firm and the small firm. You have this single lawyer versus the lawyer firm. Depending on what you're dealing with, it's good to, if not using both, because one is like $450 and the other one is $1,500 per hour. So $1,500 per hour is pretty painful. So you don't want to use these too often. So you have to be sure that you know who these people are, even if you don't use any. The worst thing is to be in a situation where you need an attorney fast and you randomly pick one because that one is available. Knowing who they are ahead of time is the best thing. So usually I say that, and almost nobody does it because they don't realize you only care about an attorney when you need one, and that's wrong. You should know them beforehand. Drafting a founding agreement. So if you're doing the business just by yourself, it's not so important, but oftentimes you'll do a business with someone else. So you have to be very clear about, in a document, who's been creating this business, when it was created, who owns what, what's the type of compensation, and who gives what. How much cash is given by who, and how much return is going to be. So sometimes people don't put cash, but they put other assets, maybe connections, maybe production assets, or maybe just sweat equity assets that they are going to be giving as hours and time they're going to spend. There may be two founders with one, which is just the one financing, and the other one is the one working. And so that's the sweat equity. And then you decide that it could still be 50-50, even though one doesn't give any money, but they will be working all the time in there. A 50-50 founder agreement is usually not very good. It turns to be a problem. So it's always better when there's one that has more in general, because then it makes it easier when there's decision that needs to be taken and there's disagreement. So that's something that has to be discussed. So the founder agreement could include what is this business about, what are the position of the founders, maybe the legal form of the business as it is now, and maybe it's going to evolve in something else in the future, because different business legal structure have different costs as well. Then how many stocks does everyone get? Maybe there's some intellectual properties that are going to be given to the business and what they are, because that's also an asset that you bring to the business. So what is the operating cost? What are the costs? And how much money do you need to put in the business in order to get started, and what you estimate to be spent for the next 6 months, next year? So that way you're not like a 3 month business and it doesn't go anywhere. And then another one that needs to be discussed 100% of the time, and it looks very crazy at the beginning, but it comes very handy, because I would say there's more than 50% chance that these people are going to get into an impasse, a situation of one of the members going to leave. And so the buyback clause is very important, is how one buys the other in order to keep the business, because they don't get along. What is the process and how much is the compensation? So all of this should be in there, and that's much better when it is. So avoiding legal disputes. So you avoid legal disputes by trusting people, but just trusting person saying, oh, I trust this person is not the best. The best is to have things written from the very, very beginning. So having your licenses is very important. When you have you're in California, you need a business license wherever you work. And then you have to also do what's called a DBA, doing business as, and you have to do this in your county and be registered as a doing business as. So it could be exactly your name, or it could be a name. It could be your name plus a doing business as, which is registered in the county. The other thing that is important is therefore what is the structure that you're going to use. So there's like more than 4, but I'm going to stick to those 4 big ones at the beginning. So sole proprietorship is you are going to be the only owner. You don't have much risks, and you don't want to spend any money. And so you choose this one because it's the most convenient, and it's the one that you can have essentially within a day by stating yourself. Then you have the partnership, which is most of the time used for law firms use partnership, or doctors use partnership if you want to have several people in the business and you're going to express this business as a partnership. Corporation is when you want to protect your assets and you want to have a very profitable way of dividing the profits in order to lower your taxes, or protect some of your taxes, or protect some of your profits. Limited liability company, it's a sort of corporation that has disadvantages. So disadvantages in the number of members that you can have, or disadvantages. What I mean is, by the limited liability company, you're limited in the number of people that you can have as co-owners or owners of shares of your business. So you can have fewer members, shareholders. In limited liability, you also have issues with the fact that you cannot go public with it. Limited liability are not public, and you can't put it in the stock market and all that. So that's what you do with a corporation. But in corporation, you have two types, the S Corp and the C Corp. So there's also limitations in the type of S or versus C, where you can't have foreign shareholders. You can only have American shareholders. So there's all kinds of pros and cons from each one of these. It all depends how much risk you're taking, and you want to protect your assets, your personal assets, if you own a house or whatever. And it all depends if you have multiple investors. If you have investors, you're going to have to take a corporation or a limited liability company. It depends if you have foreign investors. It depends also how you want the tax to be. So if these people are in California, they may want corporations. If they want a different system of taxation, if they are not from California and all that. So I went into a little bit more details by giving you a short description for each one of them. But the reality is, you can find a book of 200 pages for each one of them. So if you can see, these are 4 lines that summarize 200 pages as well. But you can go to this, and here you will have sort of the essential boilerplate answer of what they are, beside what I've explained. Now, other consideration. So it's, like I said, is number of investors, if you have investors, if you have assets, if you are protecting taxes, and which one makes the most sense. For example, a corporation is the one that takes the most administrative duty. You have more things that you have to do administratively and with the state when you have a corporation, when you have a LLC. That's why LLC are very popular, because it's less duty and less pain in the neck, if you want. So also the other thing that's important is, you could say, oh, I start with a sole proprietorship, and when I reach a milestone, or when I have an investor, or when I have a partner that join, then I either do a corporation or limited liability. Then you say, oh, I have an investor which is a foreign investor, so I cannot do one of the corp. So I have only one of the corp, the S Corp, that I can do. But then I could do the LLC. So maybe what we do is we start with the LLC, because it's less administrative duty. And if this business becomes bigger and bigger, and we have more staff and secretaries and administrative people, then we move into a corporation. In both cases, the corporation and the limited liability they can both be passed through, or they can both, so the limited liability is the pass through. The corporation can be where you have 2 taxation as well. That's the problem. Is you're going to have your personal taxation on the dividends that you're going to get, and you're going to have taxation of the company. So it's sort of a corporation are taxed 2 times. And if you have a corporation, you will need an accountant, because it's too complex for most people to deal with. Limited liability are much more simple. You should still get an accountant, a tax accountant, but more easy to do yourself. So, but there'll be, I think Chrysler is a limited liability company. So it's a big company. So it's not like big company do corporation and not limited liability. There's more to it, that it's not big company do corporation, small company do limited liability. But it's easier if you're a small company to start with limited liability. And then as you become bigger and you want to get more investors, thousands of investors, then you need to move in corporation. It's much more suited for that. Now, the next legal things that is very important is to think about things that you've already reviewed, I know, in length. That was just one class that you had to take. But I just want to remind you that it's important to think about the copyrights, the patents, and the trademarks. So those things, when you're an entrepreneur, are not as obvious because a lot of people avoid them, and some people don't like to go into this, but it's very important because you cannot start a business with a brand when this brand already exists. You will get into a litigious situation, and it's not good. The patent is sort of the same idea, is you want to protect yourself in order to avoid being copied. But it's also important to see that, you know, in all of these things, from my experience, is there's no such a thing as 100% sure to be protected. There is mistakes that are made. There are people that may even try to get things from you, and it's kind of not 100%, but it's worse not to have them. It's worse to ignore them. It's very important to take them into consideration. Now, moving into the last part of the presentation, I will talk about the issues related to funding. So why do you need funding? Because it always costs more than you think to have a business. There's always issues with money. So there's the issue with the cash flow, that you need money in order to run the business day to day. There's also the issue related to the investments that you're going to need to have in order to have inventory, in order to create new products. And creating new products always takes more time and often doesn't work as you plan. So therefore, there's more money that you will need than the money that you thought when you started. So where you're going to get money is 4 sources, and I'm going to go through these 4 sources: personal funds, equity capital, debt financing, and creative sources. So one gentleman that I mentioned in the last class is I asked you, you know, who's the most famous person or the richest person that went to CSUN, and it's Dan Pena. So Dan Pena is a celebrity entrepreneurship influencer, which has millions of views. And here is one of the sample videos that we started looking at one in the last class. And here's it might be a different video than I mentioned the last time, but you can find a lot of videos. In fact, he has a consultant website with Dan Pena. You'll find it right away, which I think is very interesting, where he's acting as a consultant for many people. He's an influencer, but in the entrepreneurship world, and he has a very different way to go about it. And he's a CSUN graduate, so it's kind of interesting to look at him. And he talks a lot about financing and where to get the money and so forth. So personal funds and friends funds. So maybe you have some savings that you could use. Maybe you have some equity in things that you could sell the equity and get the money. Or maybe you could use the money from the family and friends. So that's an easy one to explain. Everyone can relate to that. The other source of financing is bootstrapping. So the idea is maybe borrowing, collaborating with other people. And so that way you could actually get to do more, not having to buy the equipment. Maybe you rent the equipment, maybe you get the equipment from a club, maybe you give a favor by using the equipment for someone and you give them a job. So I don't know, you're making videos and maybe you get the video equipment from someone and you make videos for them and you help them with the video while you can use the equipment for free. So bootstrapping is very important. There's many style, like I said, so renting instead of buying equipment with some other company and sharing the equipment, leasing the equipment. All you try to do is you minimize the use of your own cash and try to use the cash from other people. So one thing that's very important is to get payment in advance from customers. So if you get the payment in advance from customers, essentially the customers are turning to be like a bank for you. And so a customer that is a bank is very useful. So how much money do you need to start the business, to maintain the business, and to grow the business is the question that you want to think about. Now, if you're getting money from someone, what do? Do you get a loan from them when they're getting a return on, they're getting an interest? You know, every month there's 3%, 6%. Or do you give them equity? If you give them equity, is they have a co-ownership of your company, and that doesn't cost you anything besides the fact that it's going to reduce your own profits. And it may create all kinds of headache having to deal with this person because you won't be free. However, you may also give equity to someone who has the capacity to invest more if you have to scale up, which is really good because if your business keeps on growing, you keep wanting money. Having someone that has a lot of money from the get-go is very helpful for the scaling. Another thing is sometimes those people that have a lot of money to give you from the get-go also have a lot of experience, maybe some experience on some of the aspects of the business that they can give you and help you make reduce the amount of mistakes that you're making. So when you look at the Shark Tanks, that's a good example. You see oftentimes these people get $100,000. You know, when you start a business with $100,000, you don't go very far. So it's not the $100,000 that they give you that are really worth. It's the experience and the network that they have that is very important. So learning to do a 60 seconds is very important. How do you speak to someone as if you were inside an elevator? What do you say? How do you present your business in 60 seconds? Extremely important. You don't get an investment for presenting in 60 seconds. You get an investment for presenting 5 minutes several times. So why would you train yourself to present your business in 60 seconds? Because you want to get the business card. You want to get the phone number, like Matthew gave us the phone number and all that. So in 60 seconds, that's what you get. You get just the chance to meet this person again and get their contacts. Nobody speaks for 60 seconds and gets $1 million, but you get their contacts. Maybe you don't meet them right away, but you meet them down the road and you try again. You try to get the 60 seconds. The purpose of the 60 seconds is to get a chance to do the 5 minutes. So what's inside this elevator pitch? So here what I do is I have a simple one. It says, it's that does so you can. And so in this situation, it's like a mineral water, and it says it's a mineral water that does have nutritional enriched calcium so you can have stronger bones. And I have no competitors or 2 competitors, but the quality of the product is inferior and our prices are more competitive. Our brand is registered, and I'm looking for an investor to get 40% of the company for an first investment of $200,000 the first year in order to grow inventory and start the social media campaign. And you will get a return of 12% the first year and 20% the second year. So that's a 60 seconds. Very brief, that talks about what is it, why do you need the money, what will happen once you have the money, and when do I get my money back. That's not lip service. That's very important. And here I break it down into the 20 second, 20, 10, 10, the different sections that you need to have. So that's not something that is required for this class. You will actually not do a 60 seconds or 5 minutes, but it's something I wanted to put in there for your own interest. And because in some way you have to sort of do it, because when you will do this 1-page presentation, you will essentially quickly present the feature, who is it for, and why this is going to work, what are the opportunities, and so forth. And that's what I do. I've started doing this in 2007 because I realized that the students didn't know much about talking to investors. So I was the director of the Wells Fargo Center, and I created the Wells Fargo Center Fast Pitch Competition, which was the first one in California where people will do Shark Tank type of competition. The reality is Shark Tank didn't exist in 2007. Shark Tank started in 2008. So I had this vision, sort of entrepreneurial vision, before it became very popular. And in fact, even in 2009 and 10, nobody knew what Shark Tank was. It was not very popular at that time. So this year is the 18th year that we are doing the fast pitch competition. And a lot of students have been practicing and doing it. And in fact, that's what I was saying. Professor Mackenzie and Professor Teagarden were among the people that participated in that competition. And they learned something. So learning to do this is very important. And then I'm giving you a little list of what I think should be in an investor pitch deck of 5 minutes, the different elements. Again, you don't have to do this. This is like a me caring sort of thing, that you may be in that position, wishing you to be in that position because it's very exciting. And then you may say, oh, remember that professor that would give that thing, and I go back in there and I can look at it, and that's hopefully inspiring. So that's usually what I like to do for students. Just to finish this, and the next 2-3 minutes, is where do you get equity funding? So when you give money, where do you get it? So the most common one are called business angels. So the business angels are people that are looking for small businesses, startup businesses, businesses at the initial stage where they could give a little bit of money, 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 to this business in order to get equity and to get a return from the first stage of the growth of this business. So they take quite big risk with little money with a big return. So they're going to expect a lot of return for this money, much more than the bank. The bank will give you the money for a much smaller amount of return than a business angel will. However, the bank is more of a sure thing, but the bank will still give you money, but they will want to have a collateral most of the time, unless it's a small business administration loan, which is a loan given to small businesses, which is given by the government. So what you do is you go to a bank and you apply for a loan. Then you go to the SBA, which is the website is sba.gov, and you go through the process to get the SBA to approve you as a business. So they look at your application, you go through the same loop as if you're looking for an investor. And if the government thinks that you're a good business, they rate you and they sort of become the collateral. And they say, you know what, I want to invest in this business as a government. I think it's really good. Go to the bank with this letter of approval from the government, and then the government will give you the money. And if things don't go right, it's the government that will give the collateral in order to protect you. So they don't give the government to every businesses. They decide who gave the money and who doesn't. So that's the SBA loan. Business angel, it's individuals. And then venture capital, it's an organization. It's an organization that has many members. The member give different amount of money. And then as a group of venture capital, they invest into a business and then they draw the money from the members. And so you say, you know, I want to go into a venture capital. I want to put $1 million in this venture capital. Usually they are venture capital that are specialized in certain industry. So they tend to be high-tech venture capital businesses or like medical health venture capital businesses. So these are the two most common. There's one or two of these venture capital for the music industry in America versus there's hundreds for the high-tech type of things. Business angels, there are several. There's the Maverick Angels, for example, in Los Angeles. There's the Pasadena Angels in Los Angeles, but they may not consider, well, they won't push away a music industry investment, but that's not what they're specialized in. But because we're in Los Angeles, there may be a lot of those business angels that do not have to be members. You just have to be someone that go to the meeting of the business angels. It's like a club. Business angels is a club versus venture capital is a real corporation that is called something venture capital, which is like a bank made of people's money and that manage this money through investments. So, all right, so I define all of this. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is just that one, which is that you make money as a business entrepreneur from the profit that you're making every month, every year. You may make very little profit because you re-inject this profit in your business and therefore your salary is really small, but the value of your business is growing. There may be a business where you make no money. It's crazy enough. It may be a business where you lose money every month, but that's not because you're making no money that you're going to toss this business. The equity value of the business may be what is really worth. So you have to remember businesses such as YouTube or even Google at the beginning, they were not making any money, yet the valuation was huge, but you don't have to think so far. You can even think about Tesla. Tesla is a business. I think they only made money 1 year in the past 15, 20 years. And every other year they lost money. Yet one of the richest men in the world is Elon Musk, and he's rich of a company. That's not the only company that he has, but that's a huge amount of his wealth. Is he owns a company that makes no money. When you think about it, it's kind of funny. The richest man in the world from making money from a company that makes no money. So obviously, I wanted to bring this up because as an entrepreneur, you don't think about, and I said, you don't work for money, and that so many people say that who are successful entrepreneurs, is you make the first focus should be the not so much. I mean, you can be someone that care about the benefit that you give to the society, and I think that's wonderful. But you also think about the value that this business is created, and that's what happens to the first business of Elon Musk when he had PayPal. He was not making any money, but he knew that PayPal was becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually it may be as big as Visa. And obviously this would be worth a lot of money. So it's the moment you will be selling the company where you will be making the most money. And Tesla is a little bit the same and so forth. So that's what something is important. So entrepreneurship requires someone that has this multiple vision of making money is not just the month to month, because that's very much of an employee. It's this big value that you're creating, and then the big reward that's going to come from the big value that you're creating. Okay. Do you have any questions? I've pretty much finished covering all the things I wanted to cover. Lots of information today. Any questions for me?
What module is this PowerPoint in? Is it in this
It's
V2?
in your email.
Oh,
Yes. Yeah, if you look in your email, I sent the one from last week, because last week what happened is I didn't finish. For some reason, I was not able to do the whole presentation that I put in the module. So if you look in module 1, you will see a PDF which is 1/3 what I presented and 2/3 that I didn't. So I just scrapped everything and I created the PDF for last week and then the 2 PDF for today. So then everything that was presented last week is done in that PDF exactly, and everything that was presented today is in that PDF. So best to get to your email and just collect those 3 files, and that would be the 3 files that I would recommend to study for the exam, because that a big chunk of your first quiz is going to be on that, and also for all the tips and directions that I'm giving you that are sort of what's expected to see, you know, talking about the persona, the STP, the strategies, the opportunities, the definition of the just noticeable difference, what's, you know, the break-even analysis, the time-sum. These are the things that are very much expected and are inside those files that you can go back and look at again when you want to craft your own one sheet. David, were you able to get to the email and see those 3 files?
yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Thank you.
Oh, okay, perfect. Any questions?
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
I've seen some companies use LTD for like limited. Is there a difference between LTD and LLC?
Well, LTD, you see it in the UK. I don't know that you see it in America. So that's for you see this in Europe, not in America. Yeah.
I've seen there's like a company out here in Nashville that uses LTD. So I was like, I was just kind of curious if there was like a difference or not.
So LTD, you see it in the UK for sure, but you also see some company here that call themselves limited, but it's like sort of, I think it's their name, but I don't think it has
a branding thing.
Yes. So it's like, it's like Nadia Acosta Limited. But then you would have to have a LLC S or Corp or something. I don't think it's an entity to be LTD. Now, here's what happened also in America is that you have some states that have something additional. So it could be that, like Delaware, because Delaware is a funny state. They do all kinds of different things than the rest of the 50 states. Or Washington, not Washington State, but the DC, Washington, DC, they may have a rule, or Connecticut. There's a few states that may have a LTD because they're sort of very Anglo. They have a little bit of this, they call themselves New England and all that. So they tend to do things a little bit more like Europe. I'm not a business lawyer, but in California, I don't think there's an LTD. I'm pretty sure there's not.
Okay, thank you.
But I would not be surprised that the LLC in America will be close to the LTD in UK as a concept, because it's the protection of the assets, and it's the idea of multiple members, and it's the idea of treating the taxes in a certain way where it's not simple on one person as a sole proprietorship. But I'm going to look into it now that you asked the question to be sure. But at this minute, I think that's the correct answer that I'm curious to see exactly. So thank you, Nadia, for
Thank
this
you.
question. All right, any other questions? So best of luck to you. Meet with your group, you know, brainstorm, develop those opportunities, and find something. You know, the tip is the easier and the most obvious it is. I mean, those are hard to find. The better you're going to be off working on that versus taking something very complicated. I said this the first class. And then the next thing is don't pick something that you're very close on because the rest of the group is going to sort of let you do it. It has to be something everyone is sort of neutral about, and therefore nobody sort of gains on it, and everyone works the same amount. Okay. And then the next thing is, that's why I'm glad Matthew came, is try to be kind to each other and survive the next month and a half, which is the tail end of your degree. You know, try to keep the most patience and think about the light at the end of the tunnel,